So first of all, can you tell me your full name and what it is that you do?
My name's Luke Edgar, I'm an artist and I work on a bunch of different mediums. Some is on people, tattooing, on glass, on steel, and trying as many things as I can.
So I wanted to start by exploring your journey, how you got here. Because I know that your dad's an artist, he shares the studio with you. So I wanted to paint a little bit of a picture of what it was like growing up in a very artistic household.
Yeah, it was just normal to be drawing and painting, and kind of, I think that was my early language almost, It was with my dad coming from architecture as well. I was always taught very basically to draw like an architect from the beginning, so everything was quite tight rather than like a free artistic feeling of throwing paint around. It wasn't really like that. It was drawing perfect shapes, perfect heads, and then the sort of looser stuff come later. But yeah, as a kid, all my toys were was art stuff, so it wasn't. I didn't think it was any different at the time. It's just normal. It's kind of the same for my kids now.
They're going to grow up to be the next rendition of the Edgar family.
Well, I think I just want them to be able to do whatever they want, and it's the thing of like getting to live a different life. Yeah, regardless of what it is, it's like you don't have to do this. It just happens to be a thing I've gone into, but do what you want.
So did you always know that you wanted to go down this sort of artistic route? Has it always been the unintentional plan? It's just sort of fallen into place?
Yeah, I can't imagine doing anything else. So it was, I knew that I had to make stuff basically, and then once I saw tattooing as well, like from really early age, like as a small child, it was kind of blown away that people could actually have this on their body and go and live their life with it. So tattooing was almost the first thing for me. Just that seemed like the ultimate. It still seems like the ultimate in a lot of ways. It's kind of, it dies with a person. It's at the end of this generation, there'll be none of my work left. Tattooing, the other stuff may survive, but there's something about that stuff dies. But yeah, I can't imagine doing anything else with my life.
Were you encouraged to pursue your art in the form of tattooing? Because obviously tattoos can be very Marmite. When I started getting tattoos, my parents were very disapproving, but they also saw what it meant in terms of expression. So with your dad coming from an architectural background, did he understand what you wanted to do through tattooing? Yeah,
they were super supportive, to be honest. So I was really lucky with that. It was kind of, I think I could have said anything no, and they would have been like, cool, do it, but if you're doing it, then commit, kind of thing. I think if I was, half-arsing something, they wouldn't have been into it, but it's just, right, commit to it and go fully into it. But yeah, they was always, my mum never liked tattooing in a way, like, because I think she was always like, just draw on paper. Why are you drawing on people? But she, I've done one dot on her so that she said that she's had something, to support it. But yeah, I was always supported.
Love that. So let's sort of back up a little bit before your professional career. I wanted to talk a little bit about school, because it's such an informative time in someone's life, especially creatively. And I think back to when I was at school, so I really wanted to go to film school, but it was never really taken seriously as an option for me to pursue. And I was just wondering whether you experienced something similar, because I think it's getting better, but I don't think kids are really encouraged to pursue the arts as much as they probably should be. Yeah. If it's something that's really innate in them and something that they really have to do, they can't do anything else. So just, what was your school experience like? I didn't like school.
I think it feels like it is kind of preparing you for an academic world from the beginning, and if you don't fit that, there's definitely outliers of schools that are not that, but most standard British schools, it is this kind of cookie cutter thing, even that you're all put in levels of, of ability in each subject as well. And if you are, more in this side, it's not even that I was bad at these things, it's just I didn't have the interest, so it's hard to put the effort in. But I didn't necessarily enjoy art in school either, though. It was kind of, I enjoyed it outside of school, but it felt too structured, and being graded for it as well. It's difficult if you're wired up a bit different, I think, isn't it? So for me, it was like, let's get out of here as quickly as possible, and start, start making work. I felt like all I need is just leave me alone and let me make my work, and I can make it then. But it was like too many influences, or you should do this, or your work should do this. It should be more this. It's like, well, I want it to be like this. Yeah.
Did you ever feel deterred in school from pursuing it? Because I used to love art. I only did it up to GCSE, but I really got told I wasn't very good at it, despite how much I loved it. And I think, looking back on it, it's probably subconsciously deterred me from pursuing it even as a hobby as an adult. So did you ever have any moments where you felt deterred? And also tying in with that, what do you think could be done within the educational system to sort of encourage art more?
Well, I almost had the opposite actually, and even though of everything I just said, because I used to get so frustrated. I think because what I had in my mind I couldn't create yet, or I still can't create it. It's like it's always way better in your mind than it actually comes out. So it's like, but I was so far away from it then, of the skill set. So I used to just find it so frustrating. I'd spend the whole week on the art homework and then throw it in the bin on the way to school. And then, parents' evening and stuff, they'd say well, Luke doesn't do any art homework, and my parents would be like, well, it's all he does, but they would never see it because I'd be like, I can't bring that in. So I decided to not take it for GCSE because I was like, I don't even enjoy this. It's just too frustrating. And the teacher said to me what are you doing? Why are you not doing it? This is going to be your job. So I'm glad she did, because it meant that I did go into that. So it's more teachers like that basically, but I'm going into a school now and doing some projects with a primary school, and they seem like it's like a creative school, and they've already got lots of art prizes for, just for pushing creativity. And in there it felt like my studio in here, the whole school. So it looks like a brilliant place for anyone to be. Yeah. So it seems like something's going in the right direction.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's about just recognising that not everyone just wants to follow that path of school, higher education, corporate job, especially post-pandemic. I think it's really important that we actually sort of lean into the arts more, because that was a time where it really was difficult to express ourselves creatively.
Definitely, and I feel like my life has taken lots of turns that I didn't expect, that it wasn't a step-by-step thing. It was kind of like, okay, I see this, and then boom, it just threw me that direction, and then throws you that direction. So you don't know what's coming, and it's being open to it as well, isn't it? Not just like, right, I'm on this set path and I'm not going to deviate. Yeah, so
that's school, but I wanted to ask about sort of family pressures or maybe influence, because having a parent that's already engaged in the arts, did you ever feel like there was something you sort of had to live up to, or maybe a sense of imposter syndrome? The answer might be just no, you were supported all the way through, but I see sometimes that when kids try and pursue the same thing that their parents are doing, that they do feel like there's big boots to fill.
Yeah, I never had that. It was I think it's because my dad was in a different part of for a little while. I liked the idea of architecture, of following that route, and I still love that idea, and I still think that could have almost been another path. That could have been another life for sure. I love that. So I think because he was following another path, but when I started to pursue a fine art career, he was still in architecture, and then he sort of followed after that. So it never felt, I never feel any competition or like a feeling of living up to. It's like we're doing our own thing, really.
And how's that dynamic here in the studio? Because your work, looking at it right now, is very different. So is it, I'm guessing it must be actually a really sort of almost comforting environment when you're both working in here together, and you're both, pursuing the same end and just, self-expression, but you're doing it so differently. Yeah,
it's different but similar. I find it's like we're both quite technical and tight with what we do. I think my stuff, when it looks looser, I'm using out of control things but trying to control them, so it looks loose in a way. Of a massive brush, or I'm using a tool that doesn't really work on this thing, but I'm trying to make it tight. And even the way my dad will work, he'll work on one painting from beginning to end, and I'll have 50 tattoos on the go and 10 paintings and some sculptures and like I have to just like of an evening I will kind of go like from one end of the room to the other and work around, you know. So it's very, very different. And I tend to make most of my artwork on my own. And my dad will paint while I tattoo a lot, but I find it a bit easier to work on my own usually.
And what came first, the tattooing or the painting in this form? And I want to sort of explore the connection between the two and how that came about.
I mean, they've all kind of all at the same time, really, that I've wanted to... I've been interested in tattooing for as long as I can remember. I've been interested in painting. It all felt like the same thing. It's just, right, there's a human here, then there's this, and there's this. It's like, they're different things, but they're not. But from the actual technical perspective of working, like tattooing onto glass and steel I'd already been tattooing for, 8 years or so before I started doing that.
Oh yeah, so I don't know whether you've heard of an artist, and I hope I don't butcher his name here, called Alex Peter Idoko.
Yep.
So he's from South Africa, and I found him on Instagram, and I'm absolutely obsessed with his work because he's doing something that is sort of similar to you, but obviously in a very unique way. But instead of using a tattoo gun on various different materials, he uses blowtorches to create these ultra realistic portraits, and they're absolutely stunning.
I have seen it. They're on wood, aren't they?
Yes.
I think. Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah.
I just wanted to, with that reference in mind, I was just wondering if we could talk a little bit about this sort of proliferation at the moment of artists really exploring new ways to interpret their canvas, and also what a canvas even has to be. Yeah, I think when I saw that, I only saw his stuff actually recently, like in the last week or so. But when I saw that, it was like, yeah, that guy's brain works in the same way as mine. It's very similar. And now that, I think it's almost like in a way of learning different languages makes you you can be speaking about the exact same thing, but where the structure of sentences are different, it makes you understand the subject differently. People say they think differently when they speak another language, and I think that with using different mediums sometimes and really trying to explore, like I don't have much interest in working with the thing that you're supposed to, like, right, I'm doing a painting on a canvas. To me feels like it's been done, at a very high level, like the highest level. So it's let's explore this as much as I can. So now that I've started welding, it's the people that I'm welding with are actually professional welders, and I'm sure they look at my welds and like, what is he doing? But it's like I'm trying to make it spit. I'm trying to like turn it down, turn this dial down, turn that one up, and get textures with it and things. So yeah, I love experimenting and seeing how far can I push anything. We were talking before about Robert Greene's book Mastery, and what I loved in that was when Da Vinci was going through his apprenticeship, it wasn't sort of until he really started experimenting with different mediums and he started sort of trying out like working with bronze and stuff like that, from my understanding in the book, he really started to develop his style.
Yeah.
And how important is it to experiment? And I'm kind of hoping that maybe there are some younger artists out there that are watching this. Like, so what sort of advice would you give them to sort of creating and finding that unique style?
I don't know. I think it's. I think it almost gets overthought and overcomplicated sometimes. I think it's like, it's almost when you're a kid, what did you want to do, and what did. Rather than trying to think like I need a unique style, it's almost like just make stuff and it's going to be your unique style, like rather than it even trying to fit into a genre sometimes is like, well, that's already been made by someone else, isn't it, in a way. So it's, and learning, it's almost like you need a starting point of just technical. So say like my apprenticeship in tattooing was brilliant. It was a lot about a loose theory of it could be applied to everything. It was never specific. So I still feel like I'm, learning from Jason, who taught me he's still in my head as I'm trying new things, you know, like won't try that, won't try that, won't try that. So I think, yeah, you need a grounding in something technical. It helps.
I think people underestimate the value in imitation as well, and I don't mean passing, you know, someone else's style off as your own.
Yeah.
But with film, for example, and photography, that like I really do look to inspirational photographers' style and tone, and especially when I was starting out, I really did try and emulate that, and I think that helped me find my own style. Like, are there any artists in any medium that have kind of done the same for you?
Massively, yeah. I would do, and I still do, lots of master copies. So I'd see, you know, a painting or whatever it is, and it's like, if you're attracted to that, draw it, or, you know, and it's kind of, it's one of them things that they're easy to draw. That's the other odd thing. When something just clicks, you know, for me, like a lot of like Caravaggio paintings with the light, you know, that singular light source, it's kind of, they're so simple that it looks good immediately. So there's definitely something in that of, you know, copy the things that you do like. And when I was an apprentice as well, I took it as like, I'm going to be brainwashed by you, and then later, once I have any understanding, I'll try and filter out and use my own mind with that thing. But in the beginning, it's like, I just kind of want what you have and take it. So my work looked a lot like his work, you know, and then I've managed to push in other directions.
So coming back to working with unique canvas materials, you've kind of told me sort of the reasoning behind why you moved to metal and glass, but I want to get like a really visceral understanding of what it's like to use those materials. Yeah,
it's interesting. It's through starting welding now, I feel like I understand more what I was doing on steel, where I've been tattooing the steel, because it's like I was using it purely surface level, and I'm really just playing with light and the way that the light will pass through the layers of paint and then reflect from the steel. But now that I'm actually using the steel as the material, like breaking it down, using it a lot more aggressively, it's kind of like, oh, I realised how subtle that was before. So it's when I felt like I'd almost explored steel, and okay, I've reached almost a limit of a plateau with it, then taking it into another completely, right, now I'm going to cut into it, I'm going to stick it to other bits, I'm going to manipulate it, becomes something completely different. But yeah, it's a tricky one to work with. It's like there's so many variables that you don't know how many the same as what you do with photography. As an outsider, you can't see how many variables there are until you're in it, and it's almost overwhelming. And then you're a few years in, and they almost become natural to you. So. And
how does it physically feel? I'm really trying to get some idea of like sensation here. How does it differ, for example, like working on steel to human skin?
Yeah.
Because what I noticed when you were tattooing earlier is how quiet like these new tattoo guns are.
Yeah.
But then as soon as you put it on that steel, like the vibrations come back and it's really noisy again. So I wanted to sort of explore the difference there.
It's very different. Emotionally, it's different as well. Say if I'm tattooing someone, it's like, right, I've got to look after you as well. You're here, so it's like I want to think about the way I'm working to make it the least painful as possible. So trying to be smart about that, you know, work my way around. Okay, this area's swelling, that's doing that. Not just going straight, like darting all over the place. Also giving you like little breathing gaps. Like I'm not just going to keep the needle, when I'm tattooing on that, I can keep the needle on. I literally keep the needle on it constantly, and I just don't let it go. It'd be nice to tattoo a person like that, but not only I need to dip, but I also, it would be too much. But yeah, the feeling is very different through you. I always think with tattooing, like through your stretching hand when you tattoo, it's like the feeling of being tattooed, except just without the sharpness. Like you feel the vibration through the person when you're stretching. But then with the tattooing on steel, it's like especially listening to classical music with it, because it echoes as you're going through, and there's definitely something to that, and building a rhythm as you're working. But then now tattooing the glass is like a completely different thing. But yeah, the same but different.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more, because looking at all of your art that we've got in the room here, the style seems very different between the glass and the steel. And why is that? Are you intentionally trying to sort of differentiate your style, or is it just through different medium?
It's with the glass, so this is my first series on glass, so it's more of a learning process of, okay, let me initially find the limits, and most of this isn't finished on the glass as well. So a lot of my steel starts off like this, where I almost cause a problem to start with, like cause some chaos, and then I have to rearrange it basically, and sometimes I find things within that. So you've just caught most of the steel work in here is finished, and the glass is in the middle basically, so they go through all kinds of changes.
And this actually comes full circle, like back to tattooing, doesn't it? Because this morning you were working on a client and you were doing a cover-up, and you said that you actually really enjoyed doing cover-ups because it is that problem-solving part of your brain, isn't it?
Definitely.
And you have something already there that's imperfect in terms of like the skin, you know, there's something already there, and you have to sort of work with what you've got.
Yeah.
And it was really fascinating watching you just freestyle around that problem.
Yeah, I think it makes me, like, if she didn't have that on her, that tattoo would have been completely different, you know. It's almost like I do constantly growing up of like get everyone to do me a squiggle, you know, and then I've got to turn that into something. And I still do that now. Like I say to my partner, just fill up a couple of sketchbooks for me of just scribbles, and it's like, right, I've got some problems to solve. So yeah, it makes me work in different ways. I think otherwise you can just fall into repetitiveness and doing the same thing. So I kind of continuously will change a variable, even if it's a small variable, of move that painting there, light it like this, or I'd work in sets sometimes. So I'll do like, a 10-minute timer, and then a 10-minute timer, a 5-minute workout, a 10-minute timer, a 5-minute, and it's all right, I'll do that all night kind of thing. So it depends what I'm doing, but just trying to hack the system a bit and get a different result.
And what's next in terms of medium? 'Cause you're moving into sculpture, you're working on some sculptures at the moment, and you're learning to weld, but are there any, aside from that, are there any materials you'd be keen to try and work with?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So it's a tricky one. Definitely, my mind is mostly working in a 3D. So since I've been thinking in that way, now I've been going back onto 2D work. I've been thinking of that as though it's a sculpture. So even when I'm working on that, I'm really imagining that, okay, this thing is wrapping like this and wrapping like this. I'm kind of making sculptures of 2D work. But yeah, I want to do something that feels that's solid but feels liquid almost. So as a sculpture, so I don't know how I'm going to do that yet, but that's kind of the next. So it's almost like a change of elements, that it just shouldn't be that, it shouldn't feel like that, but it's a solid piece.
That's really beautiful. Let's talk about, you said liquid, and my eyes are just drawn to like all of the glasswork behind you. I wanted to ask you a little bit about inspiration for your pieces. Like obviously you've got some very varied work in here, from these more celestial pieces on glass to the amazing portraits of like your family on steel. Yeah. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
Just from life, to be honest. It's very rarely from an artist. I mean, they're all in there, but from an artist it tends to be more a technical thing. Technical problems I go to them for, like, okay, that guy's really good at noses. How does he do that? Okay, but that's just like technical issues, like fixing a tyre on a car or something. But yeah, it's just from life. I sketch constantly, so I always have a sketchbook on me. Mostly being away from the studio and having them breaks away from it and just living. It's more that I have way too many concepts than I have time to do them. So the difficult thing is filtering them down and thinking which ones do I actually want to commit the time to. But yeah, I'm not too sure whether the concepts just kind of come.
So Let's talk a little bit more about like your family pieces, because I wanted to ask you, how has becoming a father impacted your creative expression?
Yeah, it's sort of, I think beforehand I was slightly nervous that it's kind of, is it going to put the brakes on it? You hear that a lot, that it's like you have kids and then it's like everything can kind of slow down with like a creative pursuit can feel quite selfish at times, because it's, you know, you need to spend lots of time on it, lots of hours, so it is a commitment, you know, of your life. It's a big chunk of your life and your partner's life as well, if you're not necessarily being there all the time. So it's tricky, but I feel more creative than ever since having kids, and I think especially as my work tends to be figurative, for the, like even the pieces that don't have people in it still feel kind of figurative to me. They're still of people in a way, but seeing a person from the beginning and seeing them develop, and everyone's talking about adding variables, seeing them add a variable almost daily is fascinating. So yeah, it's only boosted it, and any kind of time wise, it sort of makes you gives you a bit of a superpower of working in restrained times, because I don't have as much time now as I did before to work, but it's better.
Yeah, because you say you work a lot either quite early in the morning or sort of into the night to sort of accommodate for family life. Has that change in working hours affected what you're creating at all? Because obviously working in like throughout the night, dark environment, like you're sort of fighting your circadian rhythm. Has it influenced at all what you're coming out with?
Yeah, massively. So that, and I use that as a variable as well. So my last series that was all on still was all done in the mornings. So it was all done from kind of 4 to 10-ish, something like that. And that definitely, and these are all done at night, which I think they look like they're done at night as well, you know, because there's also the thing of I'm fighting falling asleep when I'm up here. So that adds another, it's like as you push past that bit into the overtired bit, it's like I think you unlock something else, but then you also get it when it's the first thing of your day, everyone's asleep. Like, but they're my two, I mean, it's the same time basically that I'm working at. It's just one of them is, I've only just woken up, one of them is, you know, I'm about to go to bed, but I am thrown off now, like after doing nights for a long time. When I do a morning, it feels so weird when I finish, because I go out and it's the middle of the day and I feel like I should be going to bed, you know, because I'm thrown off with times, but yeah.
Of course, I want to change things up a bit and talk about sort of being an artist and opportunities sort of in the 21st century, because you've recently won the Dubel Award, which is absolutely amazing, so congratulations.
Thank you.
But what is the landscape like for artists at the moment? Because from a photography and documentary perspective, it's really tough, and it's really hard to find funding for documentaries you want to do. Usually a lot of the projects we do create end up sort of being self-funded, or at least partially self-funded, and yeah, the landscape's just really tough and ultra competitive at the moment.
Yeah.
What's it like for you being a full-time creative but in a different medium?
It's super difficult, and I think it takes some, like, you better really want to do it, basically. It's like it's tricky. And I think it's, I'm lucky that I don't have to do a job that, you know, like on the side or something like that, that you don't want to do necessarily. But sometimes doing something like that may push your work in a completely different direction, because you're getting this life experience during that bit. And it's like, that could literally be your whole research bit, you know, like, if you're a portrait artist, go and work in a shop or something, right? Like, how many faces are you going to see? How many interactions are you going to see? So I think it can be a positive in that bit, but don't expect it to happen quick. You know, it takes years before things start moving. I think people need to see that, because there's so many people, you know, pursuing a creative career. It's kind of like, I think people need to see that you're not going anywhere, like you're here to stay in a way in this world. But I do think there's, from kind of what we do, is like there's opportunities everywhere from what I found. But it's difficult to put in the time to find the opportunities and to make the work. So I've got a lady, Jess, that is brilliant and helps me with all of that kind of thing. I wouldn't be able to do almost anything that I am doing without that. She's like the research person and she understands my work, you know, almost as much as I do. So she really sees stuff and is like, okay, that'd be a good opportunity, that'd be a good opportunity. So, you know, if you can get other people to help you too, is pretty handy. It's difficult to do it by yourself.
Yeah, I really hear what you're saying about that. Sometimes there is value in stepping away, maybe doing some other work to maybe gain a fresh perspective. Because coming back to that mastery book, I'm reminded of Albert Einstein and how he actually went to go and work in a patent office when he first had the idea of relativity, because he didn't want to be doing a job that took up all of his mental capacity.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was actually whilst he was working in that patent office that he came up with, you know, some groundbreaking science that is fundamental to life today, and that might not have happened if he hadn't have given himself that space to reflect and to think, and that space to just to be creative. Yeah, it's like you only have so much brain power in each day, basically, right? And I think as well, of having an actual space to work in is a bit of a game changer, you know, like depending on what you do. Say if it is something like what I do, if you paint, it's like have a space that you paint in, that you don't have to clear your stuff up, is which is, I know it's difficult, people live in small homes or like, you know, their parents or something, but if you could just have a spot, it doesn't matter how big, it could be like this, a tray that just stays like that, you're way more likely to do it. You know, that's what I think, of having this place that's like an actual studio that you pay for, it's like you've got to come and do it, you know. But if you had to pack everything away, you know, little bits like that I think make life harder or easier if you do it. Yeah, well, I wanted to come back to sort of creativity in the modern era, because when I was doing some research on you for this interview, I watched another interview you did on YouTube about the Nobel Prize, and one thing you mentioned really struck me, and you were talking about how instead of trying to reach for your phone in those moments when you're a bit bored or you're a bit distracted or something, you always try and reach for a sketchbook instead. And I wanted to talk about the importance of really, because you have to be really active now in trying to nurture that creativity, because we live in a world that is just full of distractions and a lot of throwaway content, should we say. So what is the value in trying to reach for that sketchbook instead of your phone?
Yeah, I think it's massive. I think it's massive for, even if you don't, you know, whatever your sketchbook is, whatever the version of your sketchbook is, it's kind of, it's massive for even if you're not going to have a career in this, just as life, it feels like, it just feels nicer being alive and not just consuming, but actually, you know, producing something. It doesn't matter what it is, you don't have to show anyone either. But yeah, and I think you actually remember moments better that way as well. Like I find, if I draw it, I will remember it. Like I'll go back and I remember everything about it. Like I remember the smell there, I remember this, remember that. Otherwise, it feels like that memory's gone, you know. So I like it for that. But I think it's harder now than ever to get. In one way, it's easier now to get good at anything because of the internet, because you have all these resources. But it's also the hardest because it's also all distractions, isn't it? Say if you just wanted to get good at drawing, it's like it's hard to get good at drawing now because you need to sit and draw. But also you can watch some of the best artists on the planet draw. So it's a double-edged sword, really.
I think the key word there is probably just as long as you're dedicated to your craft, whether that is through learning on YouTube videos or it is picking up a sketchbook, that's sort of the main thing. And I wanted to tie that concept of like dedication and discipline into your love for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts, because that's something that also requires a lot of self-discipline, doesn't it? And I wanted to talk about how discipline impacts your art. Yeah,
it's kind of the consistency of doing something for me is I feel like you can't be actually really good at something if you're doing it, you know, once every now and then, and you're only thinking about it then as well, right? Like I think you can develop pathways and things purely just through thinking about it. You haven't actually got to be doing the thing. But yeah, being around fighters is brilliant because, you know, they have consequences, obvious consequences if they're not disciplined, or even if they are disciplined. But yeah, I always relate to them more than artists a lot of the time. So they're quite inspiring to be around.
And how does that present itself in your work? Is that through like your daily dedication to getting up early or working late to work on your art? Like what lessons have you learned through martial arts that you employ?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, you know, dotting your I's and crossing your T's kind of thing in every aspect. It's like people don't get to see these things, but you know if you've put that in, especially through something like tattooing. For me, it's like I'm drawing constantly, almost out of fear, that it's like I'm going to be putting this on someone for the rest of their life. I'm drawing it on you while you're there. I want to know I can draw on you as well. So it's like I'd hate the feeling of, as I'm working on you, thinking like, fuck, I should have been drawing more. You know, I could have been more skilled at this. But you always feel like that. I always feel like that still. But
I wanted to talk about a concept that Dave actually mentioned earlier, and it's the idea of flow state. Because flow state can happen it doesn't even have to be like an artistic pursuit. It could also be, you know, just through any sort of hobby, whether that's sports or creative writing. What does the idea of flow mean to you?
I call my daughter Flo. So there you go. That's one of the reasons for sure, Florence. But yeah, no, flow's everything. It sort of feels like that is one of the best bits of being a human, isn't it, really? But do you know what? It's tricky because I don't always hit a brilliant state of flow, and it feels brilliant when you're in it, but sometimes I feel like I work on pieces and it feels like a fight from beginning to end that is uncomfortable. I'm almost struggling to keep concentration with it at times. There's no flow, but sometimes that can be better work than my really nice flow state work. So, and other times not. Other times it'll be like, right, I have like hours in a flow state, and it works. But yeah, I found that it's kind of, that's the ideal, but sometimes it doesn't feel good. It feels like it's hard to get the work out of you, but that can be the strongest stuff.
Yeah, I can really relate to that because it's kind of the idea that you're never going to have perfect conditions, or you're not going to have perfect conditions all the time. And I'm currently putting off writing a fiction script because all the conditions aren't right. And someone told me at a film festival last week, just put pen to paper every day, whether it's 2 minutes or it's 2 hours. And how do you relate to that in terms of the conditions that you work in, maybe whether that's mentally or physically?
Yeah, one thing I've definitely found that has been insanely helpful with like keeping a project moving or starting a project is, we spoke about the Stephen King book on writing, and I've read that probably an embarrassingly amount of times. But one thing that he says is like, never finish the day on a full stop. Finish halfway through a sentence when you know what you need to do, so you've got something to do when you come in, because the first part is the hardest. It's like going out for a run or something. That initial bit before you get the second wind is horrible, you know. So it's kind of like, so I do that every time. And literally, if I'm working on a section and it's all like, say, this one texture, and I've got like this amount left until I'm starting the next bit, like I'll leave that bit. So then my next session, it's like, I haven't got to sit in front of it and think, what am I doing? It's like, right, I'm going to start that, and then you're off the session, and then the session's gone. That's been super helpful for me, which is obviously almost like a little technical thing. So it won't work for everyone, but for me that works. So
it's really interesting to hear that you get like a lot of inspiration from other sources outside of sort of conventional art. Like we've spoken a lot about like creative writing.
Yeah.
What other sources do you draw from? Is there anything quite like unusual that's actually influenced some of your art? Because I think people can get quite limited in what they look at for inspiration, and it can be anything.
Yeah, for me it's literally anything. It's like, you know, any texture anywhere, any shadow, any like movement, you know, someone move in a weird way and I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird, I like that. You know, it's just picking up anything in life, much more than looking at, because I feel like when I look at other people's artwork, it's like that's just stuff they noticed, you know, and thought, oh, that's interesting enough to, you know, pause time for a minute on it. But it's kind of like, that's, you know, that was their life. And to me, it's more interesting to see like what is life like from your view, for my work personally anyway. So it's just all through life.
Yeah, a lot of that inspiration's internal, isn't it? I think we can't help but draw from that internal pool.
Yeah.
When we first came in and we were looking at your art, you were saying a lot of the male figures, whether intentionally or unintentionally, are you, even if it's kind of just a bit of you. Yeah.
Usually it's like purely as a reference, as like it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm the only one here. So, and I need to know what like a shoulder looks like from behind. Right, okay, let's photograph it, you know. And if it's a female, then it's my partner. Like the portrait I done of her was actually, I came home one night and that's exactly how she was laying on the bed. And I like slowly crept up onto the bed and stood above her. And just as I went to take the photograph, she jumped off the bed. So I was like, right, we've got to recreate it, because that's like the perfect lighting, everything's spot on. So it's weird probably if you live with me.
Does it feel different when you create art with your kids or your partner in it?
Yeah, massively. My aim is to do, because they're life size, them portraits, so my aim is like every 5 years throughout their life, so that it's kind of, I get to see them grow. If they have kids, then they can be in there and stuff like that as well. Yeah, it's tricky, it's stressful, to be honest, because I just finished another commission for someone and that was a portrait, and she didn't see it in the you know, as it's being made, but like my partner Kerry would come in and I'd see her face and she'd look at the painting and I can see that she didn't like it, and it was like, oh God, you know. So it's tricky because you're seeing it and all that. It's like, don't judge it, you know, you're purple at the minute and stuff like that. It's definitely stressful. Yeah.
You sort of just have to ask for a bit of trust, don't you, in your vision? Yeah,
I find portraits tough because I love doing them, but I feel like I just end up being obsessed by them. So for my own family, it's easier because, especially when I was really little, because like the one of my daughter, most of that portrait, she was on my lap while I did it. So I could literally look at her and go like, okay, you know, how does that look? But not with my son, because he'll try and eat everything. So I can't do it with him. Yeah.
My last question for you is just, I just wanted an insight into what you got planned for the future.
Not a lot, honestly. It's sort of seeing, take it as it comes in a way. Like I just want to be able to, you know, not have a real job forever and create stuff. I hope that if I could see my work in 10 years, I wouldn't recognise it in a way, you know. Like I don't want to be able to just have like one thing and that's it, you know. So hopefully it develops and turns into something that I didn't even know existed yet, you know. That's the plan, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really interesting actually. Just one final thought, because when I look at photographs, for example, that I shot when I first got into photography, they're unrecognisable to like the kind of stuff that I shoot now, and that's not that they're better or worse, although I'd love to think that, you know, generally I'm getting a bit better. But how has your style changed from being that kid that didn't even want to do art GCSE and sort of starting out? What's similar and what's different? Yeah,
I think it's more similar now to being me as a teenager than it was, you know. I think it's almost full circled its way around in a way. It's quite interesting. Like I've done sketches and then I'll find other drawings I did then and I'm like, that's basically the same drawing, you know, that I've kind of forgotten about. So it's like these same, I always feel like I'm kind of chasing the same the same thing in a way. Like I look at a lot of my work and it's like I feel like I'm painting the same thing over and over again in a way. So it's like I'm obviously chasing a thing that I haven't reached yet, you know. So
yeah, there's something very deep subconsciously, isn't there? That's
there's
trying.
something
It's
in
just
there.
like something that's poking at you. Like, go on, keep trying.
Yeah, and it's weird because it is like it's not an image. It's definitely a feeling of something, but it's kind of like you do something and you're like, yeah, that's kind of it. I don't know what it is. It's not like, oh, you put that colour there and that colour there and it does it. It's like, I don't know what it is, but it's a definite like, cool, that's it, you know. But we'll see.
The beautiful thing is though, you're never going to get there fully.
No, never. No, and I think that with, you know, it's never that calm in my head while I'm working. You know, even if it looks it, it's like it never turns out as good as I think it is. You know, like before I start it, it's brilliant, and then it's like, oh, I didn't quite reach it, did it? But I'd be scared if I did reach it. It's like, fuck, what do I do next? So.